Romania, land of wild mountains, land of ancestral villages, land of forests and infinite horizons. Wild horses gallop freely across the prairies. Mighty rivers cross remote valleys. Medieval towers stand out against the sky. Welcome to Romania. Welcome to the land of Dracula. Known for its mysterious landscapes, this is a land where the Carpathians dominate the horizon, where cities are born between legends and traditions, and where history intertwines with the oldest folklore in Europe. But let's start from the beginning. Romania extends as a surprisingly balanced territory shaped by its great central mountain range, the Carpathians. It is within these mountains that one of the most extensive forest ecosystems in Europe is preserved. Over 12 million hectares, or nearly 30 million acres of forests, about 28% of the national territory, constitute an essential habitat for species now rare in the rest of the continent. And we're talking about the presence of European brown bears, with about 6,000 specimens, as well as the presence of 2,500 wolves and 1,500 lynx. This mountain barrier is not just an element of the landscape, but the factor that divides the nation, having shaped climates, ecosystems, and human settlements. To the north, in fact, rolling hills extend covered by humid forests where rainfall is abundant and vegetation grows thick. In the center, the mountain arc generates distinct microclimates, with closed valleys and exposed slopes, which have developed different environmental conditions just a few kilometers apart. To the south and east instead, the mountains give way to large agricultural plains, which gradually descend toward the Danube and the Black Sea. This geographical conformation gave rise to three historical regions. We find Transylvania to the west, Moldavia to the east, and Wallachia to the south. And each one developed in a relatively autonomous way. Among all of them, Transylvania historically has been inhabited by diverse communities. Romanians, Hungarians, Saxon Germans, and Roma have coexisted here for centuries, each bringing their own architectural and cultural traditions. The result is a landscape dotted with fortified churches, medieval citadels, and villages where construction styles overlap, witnessing centuries of multi-ethnic coexistence. Industrialization reached this nation in a late and especially irregular way, also because of communism. And this generated a strong differentiation between urban and rural areas, which persists even today. In large cities like Bucharest, Cluj, and Timișoara, the lifestyle has progressively aligned with Western models. In rural areas, instead, social practices and beliefs continue to exist, which have their roots in earlier eras. Modern-day Romania, therefore, presents two parallel realities, linked to the same territory, but profoundly different. If the Carpathians constitute the dominant element inside the country, the Danube represents the border and the connection with the rest of Europe. The river crosses Romania from west to east until it dissolves into the Danube Delta, which is the second largest wetland in Europe after the Volga Delta. This ecosystem is characterized by a low human presence and high biodiversity, with channels, lagoons, and islands, which form a largely intact environment. And then there is the Black Sea, which has always had a less central role compared to the rest of the territory. However, since ancient times, it has represented a significant commercial and cultural route, connecting Romania to the routes of the Eastern Mediterranean. Romania, therefore, is much more than a simple nation. It is a world of precarious balances between mountain and plain, between past and present, and it continues to tell its complex story to anyone who visits it. But now let's go discover the most incredible and iconic places of this nation. Brașov and its castles. Among the mountains of Transylvania, there is a city that for centuries served as a bridge between different cultures. It was born as a defense point in the 12th century when German colonists called Saxons arrived here to protect the borders of the Hungarian kingdom. The medieval walls still surround the ancient core and tell this story of defense and commerce. The main square is the beating heart of the city. Here, the Black Church stands, so called after the fire that in 1689 blackened its walls. With its 43,000 square feet, or 4,000 square meters, it is one of the largest Gothic buildings in Eastern Europe. Not far away stands the Palace of Justice, with its imposing facade, which testifies to the administrative importance during the Austro-Hungarian period. Climbing Mount Tampa, then, we find the Hollywood-style Brașov sign, which has become the symbol of the city. From here, you immediately understand why this position was so strategic. Half an hour from the city stands the castle that the world associates with Dracula, the Fortress of Bran. Was built in 1377 as a control point on the border between Transylvania and Wallachia. Its towers and secret passages served to defend against Ottoman invasions. Vlad III, nicknamed the Impaler for his brutal methods of punishment, most likely never lived in this castle. But the legend linking him to Dracula has ended up becoming more famous than the real historical facts. And today, thousands of tourists walk through its rooms looking for traces of the vampire. Another important structure, a few kilometers from Brașov, is the Fortress of Râșnov. It clings to a hill that dominates the valley and was built by the Teutonic Knights in the 13th century to protect the Saxon villages from Mongol and Ottoman invasions. The walls enclosed an entire village, and during sieges, hundreds of people lived inside for months. At the center of the fortress, there is a well 469 feet, or 143 meters deep, dug by hand in the 17 years by two Turkish prisoners who hoped to obtain freedom. In reality, they never obtained it. Transfăgărășan Road. This road did not exist until 1974. The communist dictator Nicolae Ceausescu, who governed the nation at the time, ordered the construction of a military road that would cross the Carpathians from north to south. He feared a Soviet invasion, like the one in Czechoslovakia in 1968. It took 4 years and 6,000 tons of explosives to open passages through the mountains. And about 40 workers died during the construction. The result is a 56-mile or 90-kilometer road with over 800 curves and 5 tunnels carved into the rock. Usually the road is closed due to snow from October to June. In summer, though, it becomes a legendary route for motorcyclists and drivers who seek curves and alpine views. Someone has even called it the most beautiful road in the world. Danube Delta. After 1,780 miles, or 2,860 kilometers, the Danube opens into a labyrinth of water before flowing into the Black Sea. The Danube Delta is the second largest in Europe, after the Volga. 1,603 square miles, or 4,152 square kilometers of channels, lakes, floating islands, and flooded forests. The river divides into three main branches, which then ramify into hundreds of secondary channels, creating a maze of water in continuous transformation. Here live over 300 species of birds, including white pelicans, cormorants, and herons. It is one of the areas with the greatest biodiversity on the European continent. Here there are no roads, but you can only move by boat. UNESCO also declared it a World Heritage Site in 1991. Sinaia. A city that was born around a monastery built in 1695 by a nobleman from Wallachia, returning from a pilgrimage to Mount Sinai. From that journey, the monastery took its name. For 2 centuries, Sinaia remained a small mountain village. But everything changed in 1870 when King Carol I decided to build here, his summer residence. Today it's a city and a modern ski resort, maintaining an elegant late 19th century atmosphere. King Carol I's residence today is called Pellish Castle, and it was the first castle in Europe to have electricity, central heating, and an elevator. The building is in German Neo-Renaissance style, with 160 rooms decorated with fine woods, marbles, stained glass, and tapestries. Each room has a theme, and inside are also kept weapons collections among the most important in Europe, with over 4,000 pieces. Sighișoara. This is the only medieval city in Transylvania still inhabited. Its walls, towers, and colorful houses of the historic center are not, however, a museum. Rather, they are places where people live, work, and raise children. The city was founded by the Saxons in the 12th century as a commercial fortress on the route that connected Western Europe to the Balkans. The clock tower, 210 feet or 64 meters high, dominates the city. Under its arches, merchants, soldiers, and artisans pass through. In 1431, Vlad III was born here, the one that history remembers as Vlad the Impaler. His house is still visitable, transformed into a restaurant. And then there are the streets, all in stone, like an old medieval postcard that has remained so authentic for 800 years. Lake Vidraru. In the 1960s, Romania needed energy. The communist regime decided to dam the Argeș River, building a dam 545 feet or 166 meters high in the heart of the southern Carpathians. Five villages ended up underwater, together with woods, churches, and cemeteries. The result, however, is an artificial lake 8.7 miles or 14 kilometers long. On the facade of the dam is carved a statue 131 feet or 40 meters high, representing Prometheus, the Titan who, according to Greek mythology, stole fire from the gods to give it to men. The statue was added in 2004 to celebrate the engineering audacity of the project. Today, the lake is also crossed by the Transfăgărășan Road, which passes right over the dam, offering a dizzying view of the water. Bucharest. They called it Little Paris until World War II. But the bombings first and the communist regime after erased much of that city. Nicolae Ceausescu demolished entire historic neighborhoods in the 1980s to build the Palace of Parliament. It is the second largest administrative building in the world after the Pentagon. 3.9 million square feet, or 365,000 square meters, built while the country was dying of hunger. Yet Bucharest survived. The historic center preserves Art Nouveau buildings, literary cafes, and Orthodox churches hidden among the buildings. The Lipscani district pulses with nightlife. On the main boulevard, then, stands the Palace of Deposits and Consignments. This building from 1900 was designed mixing neoclassical elements with Art Nouveau decorations. The glass dome, 98 feet or 30 meters high, illuminates the main atrium. At Christmas, then, the city transforms. In Constitution Square, right in front of the Palace of Parliament, stands the largest Christmas market in Romania, with craft stalls, specialties like Kazanak and mulled wine, ice skating rinks, and Santa's house. Bârsana Monastery. Oak wood that supports structures 187 feet or 57 meters high. No nails, no screws, only joints and handed-down knowledge. The master carpenters of Maramureș have been building like this for centuries, with beams that support themselves through pure geometry, pointed roofs that discharge the weight of snow, and carved portals. The entire area presents itself today as a large garden, very well maintained, within which there are flower beds, small ponds, and wooden gazebos connected by lovely walkways. The nuns live in this monastic complex in prayer, which is freely accessible, as is the parking lot located in front of it. Sibiu. A city founded by the Saxons in the 12th century, which for centuries remained the economic center of Transylvania. The artisan guilds controlled trade and politics. Still today, it maintains the appearance of a German merchant city. There are colorful houses with sloping roofs, cobblestone squares, and Gothic churches. But there is a detail that strikes, and that is the eyes. The roofs, in fact, have windows shaped like wide-open eyes, and they are the skylights of the attics, which served to ventilate the spaces where meat was dried and grain was stored. Sibiu was also European Capital of Culture in 2007, in recognition that transformed this provincial city into an international tourist destination. Lake Bicaz. At this exact point, a canyon was closed in 1960. A dam 417 feet, or 127 meters high, was built to block the Bîstrița River. And the water rose slowly, submerging the valley below. Today, a lake extends for 18 miles, or 30 kilometers. Nestled between rocky walls, that exceed 3,280 feet, or 1,000 meters in height. The color changes with the light, and it is not a random optical phenomenon. The limestone sediments in suspension reflect wavelengths differently depending on the angle of the sun. Turda Salt Mine. Here, 394 feet or 120 meters underground, the temperature remains constant at 54 degrees Fahrenheit or 12 degrees Celsius. And the silence is total. Humidity reaches 80%, creating a microclimate that transforms the ancient mine into a natural therapeutic environment. Salt extraction ceased in 1932, but the cavity found new life. Today, in fact, it hosts an underground park with a Ferris wheel, mini golf course, and navigable salt lake. The air is 5 times purer than outside because the salt crystals release negative ions, which purify the lungs. Timișoara. Electric light arrived here in 1884. Before Paris, before Vienna, the streets were illuminated when the rest of Europe was still burning oil. And precisely this vocation for modernity has marked everything. There is Art Nouveau architecture that dominates the center, Viennese cafes where Romanian, Hungarian, and German are spoken without distinction, and squares that open one after another like rooms of a palace. The 1989 revolution against the communist regime started right here, and the protests then spread throughout the country. Union Square is the heart of the city. It too, like the entire historic center, was restored after decades of communist neglect. Today, the city looks like a small provincial Vienna, with arcades, pastel-colored facades, and period street lamps. There is also the Bega River that crosses the city, drawing a perimeter that recalls the canals of Central Europe. Retezat National Park. The mountains here hide 80 glacial lakes. The ice retreated 10,000 years ago, leaving basins that now reflect the peaks. The glacial cirques, called vai in Romanian, create natural amphitheaters, where vegetation changes with altitude. Below 4,593 feet, or 1,400 meters, forests of firs and beeches grow. Beyond this elevation, only alpine grasses and bare rock. Here live chamois, brown bears, and golden eagles. No paved road penetrates the heart of the park, and the isolation has preserved an ecosystem that elsewhere in Europe has disappeared. Alba Iulia. A fortress city in the heart of Transylvania. The star-shaped walls built between 1716 and 1738 enclose 7 bastions on a perimeter of 7.5 miles or 12 kilometers. Inside, the Coronation Cathedral houses the sarcophagi of local princes. In 1918, the Union of Transylvania, with Romania, was also proclaimed here. The streets of the citadel maintain the original Roman design with an intersection of main roads, which divides the city into 4 equal parts. On weekends, during the tourist season, the changing of the guard ceremony evokes Austrian military traditions. There are soldiers in period uniforms who march in sync along the fortress walls. Lake Bâlea. At 6,673 feet, or 2,034 meters altitude, surrounded by mountains, there is a glacial lake born thousands of years ago when the Carpathian glaciers retreated. It is 1,181 feet, or 360 meters long, and 36 feet, or 11 meters deep. In summer, it reflects the mountains in an intense blue. In winter, instead, it freezes completely. On the lake stands a historic mountain lodge, built in 1906, along with several smaller structures. In winter, next to it, an ice hotel also takes shape, rebuilt every year with blocks cut from the lake itself. The rooms, tables, glasses, everything is made of ice. Cluj-Napoca. Thirteen universities concentrate 100,000 students in a city of 300,000 inhabitants. And this proportion shapes everything. Cafes stay open until late at night, tech startups are born in courtyards, and young people fill the squares. The historic center mixes Baroque, Gothic, and socialist brutalism without apparent hierarchy. St. Michael's Church has dominated the main square since the 14th century, while a few steps away, the Art Museum occupies a palace that was a princely residence. Cluj is not a tourist city in the classic sense, but it is an urban laboratory where communities have overlapped for centuries, and it works precisely because of its contradictions. Turda Gorge. A natural corridor carved in limestone rock by the Hasdate River. The vertical walls block direct light for most of the day, and so the temperature remains cool even in the middle of August. Humidity favors mosses and ferns, which grow in the cracks of the rock. Climbers come here for the equipped routes, with bolts and ropes fixed to the wall, which allows safe climbing. There is also a road that crosses the gorge, and it was built in the 1800s to directly connect Transylvania to Hungary. Before, instead, the carts had to make long detours through mountain passes, losing days of travel. Viskri. "500 inhabitants and 200 Saxon houses. A village that time forgot to erase. The German colonists arrived here in the 12th century to defend the borders of Transylvania, building a fortified church with walls 10 feet or 3 meters thick, capable of resisting sieges. Around it, the houses are aligned along a single street, still following the medieval layout of the village. The fields are still plowed with horses, and hay is collected by hand, stacked in sheaves that dot the meadows. This traditional agriculture has preserved biodiversity, with many more butterfly species living here compared to any other area of Romania. Bușteni. The mountain rises vertically, and in 15 minutes, the cable car covers 4,593 feet, or 1,400 meters of elevation, starting from the town. This quick access has transformed this city into a mandatory starting point for those who want to explore the Bucegi Mountains without walking for days. The climate changes in a few minutes and fog can envelop the plateau while the sun shines in the valley. The town lives precisely because of this position, with hotels and restaurants, but the early 20th century alpine-style villas tell of when it was a summer destination for families from Bucharest. Just outside the town center stands Cantacuzino Castle. Built in the neo-Romanian style in the early 20th century and surrounded by a park with views of the surrounding peaks. Gura Humorului. Eight painted monasteries, concentrated in 19 square miles, or 50 square kilometers, with exterior walls covered in frescoes. The pigments have lasted for 500 years because the application technique sealed the color in the still fresh stucco. We find the blue of lapis lazuli, the red of cinnabar, and the green of malachite. Gura Humorului is the gateway to this UNESCO heritage and serves as a hub for accommodations, guides, and organized transport to the monasteries. But here, life does not revolve only around tourism. There are sawmills that process Carpathian wood, while small farms produce cheeses. Hoia-Baciu Forest. The trees grow crooked, and the trunks curve for no apparent reason. Botanists hypothesize soil anomalies, perhaps underground radiation, which alters their growth. At the center of this forest opens a perfectly circular clearing where nothing has grown for decades, despite the soil being fertile and sun exposure good. Local legends speak of disappearances and unexplained lights, while skeptics cite the urban interference of Cluj-Napoca to explain the anomalies. But the concrete facts remain, with deformed trees, a sterile clearing, and a constant flow of curious people who come to see with their own eyes. Rupea Fortress. basalt rock emerges from the plain. On this base, Saxon colonists built in the 14th century a tiered fortress, following the mountain's profile. Each level had a precise function. Warehouses below, dwellings in the center, guard posts on top. Access was through narrow ramps, which slowed attackers, forcing enemies to expose themselves to defenders' arrows. The system worked for centuries, protecting the community from Ottoman and Tatar invasions. When the threats ceased, the fortress was abandoned and nature reclaimed it. Only in 2013, a complete restoration brought the structures back to their original appearance. Mary Cemetery of Săpânța. Death here is not scary. In the small village of Săpânța, near the Ukrainian border, the cemetery is an explosion of colors. Each grave has a hand-painted wooden cross with scenes from the deceased's life. And below, an epitaph in verse that tells who that person was, sometimes with irony. It all began in 1935 when Stan Ioan Patraș, a carpenter, decided to celebrate life instead of mourning death. He was inspired by the Dacians, who were the people who inhabited these lands before the Romans and who celebrated funerals. Ciucaș Mountains. The conglomerate spires draw a jagged profile against the sky. These rocks are composed of pebbles cemented together by minerals, formed millions of years ago on the bottom of ancient rivers, which erosion then sculpted into towers and pinnacles. The trails climb through fir forests up to alpine meadows, where in summer gentians and edelweiss bloom. Here hiking meets mountaineering, and the refugees allow breaking up the longest stages. The isolation of the massif has also preserved populations of lynx and bears, which rarely come into contact with humans. Rimetea. The white houses reflect the light, creating a sharp contrast with the mountain that towers over them. This Hungarian village in Romanian territory maintains unique architectural traditions. We find facades whitewashed with lime, portals decorated with geometric motifs, and red tile roofs. The community still speaks Hungarian as its main language and preserves folk customs which have disappeared elsewhere. The cobblestone streets lead to the 13th century Reformed church, a spiritual reference point for the inhabitants of this community, which still lives on agriculture and livestock. Bistrița. The river crosses the city, giving its name both to the settlement and to the surrounding region. This position along a medieval trade route once brought prosperity to Saxon merchants. The Evangelical Church dominates the center with its 246-foot or 75-meter tower, the tallest in Romania. Inside, the Baroque organ is still played during services. During traditional festivals, folk groups perform in costume, keeping alive the dances and songs of Saxon and Romanian culture. The medieval walls have almost disappeared. However, the historic center and the central square remain, with buildings that mix Gothic, Renaissance, and Art Nouveau. Sphinx of Bucegi. Up here, the wind has been eroding the sandstone for millions of years. And the rock has taken on a shape that resembles a human face. There is a clear profile, a protruding forehead, and a pronounced nose. It is not a coincidence, but geology. In fact, the harder layers resist, the softer ones give way. The result is a natural sculpture, 26 feet or 8 meters high. Around it, other rock formations create a lunar landscape. Concluding this visual journey through Romania, we have moved from ancient cities to the peaks of the Carpathians, exploring together not only places, but also traditions that make every corner of this land unique. We hope that the images and stories told have enriched your knowledge and stimulated the desire to personally explore the extraordinary beauty of this country.